Hey, happy Sunday, everybody. Tim from Alpha Wolf Trading coming at you with this week's pro member video that I decided to share with everyone. Hope you're having a great weekend. Uh, so, look, last couple of weeks, pro members have been actually had some caution flags out about the markets just because where we were technically, we were at some areas of potential resistance. We had a nice recent run, and there was just some sectors that was a little bit concerned about, and we had the Fed coming up, so we had some things that could impact the markets. So we've been, kind of looking at TVIX, UVXY, TZA, LABD, some of the short biased ETFs and volatility plays, and that turned out to be a pretty good call. The question is, because we had a pretty significant pullback last week, but I mean, is this the beginning of a full blown bear market, or is this just a well overdue correction that needed to take place, and it's going to create some opportunities to go long? I am leaning towards the latter. However, I will tell you this: if Dennis Gartman comes out and says that he is short U.S. equities, long emerging markets, then I would look at that as a buying opportunity for just about everything when it comes to U.S. equities. Uh, that guy has had the worst luck with making calls at the worst time. So I think it was last Monday that he was emphatically long U.S. equities, short emerging markets, and we can see what happened last week. Now, I am kind of kidding, right? If Dennis Gartman does come out and say that, I'm not necessarily just going to buy everything. But I can tell you what I am thinking might happen next week is that we've got the bond market close on Monday. That could give equities a little bounce on Monday, a little snapback. But then when Tuesday comes back around, that might be a short-lived bounce. That's kind of what I'm thinking. I mean, we're at an area of potential price support in several areas, and you can see that here on the IBB, right? We've come down to an area where we may have some potential price support. We've got the IWM where we've come down to an area that could act as price support, and the 200-day moving average. Well, NASDAQ potential price support area. Same thing. Same thing with the SMH. Right, we're at an area of potential price support, but I have not liked the trend in the semiconductors for a while. We've been making lower highs. Now we weren't making lower lows, but we could be looking at that potentially happening soon. SMH is looking a little guilty till proven innocent. SPXS, that's short bias ETF, 3-time bear ETF, got a nice little pop. We're coming up and testing an area, testing a trend line. Hold on a second. Testing a trend line here and also testing the moving average. S&P 500 pulling back, testing looks like the 50-day area of potential price support. TVIX, right, got a nice little pop in volatility on Friday, actually last week, right? So we could be looking to break a trend line here. Now, these are usually short-term trading vehicles. You got to be pretty careful with these things, but definitely worth keeping an eye on for like an intraday setup, potential day trading opportunity. TZA, small caps, right? We've got small caps which are breaking down. TZA moves opposite of the IWM, right? So if the IWM is pulling back, you get TZA moving higher. That's getting to an interesting area. UVXY. Financials, so next Friday we start getting earnings, and we've got some pretty decent names. JP Morgan, Citibank, Wells Fargo, I believe, are all reporting on Friday. And I think actually financials are kind of in an interesting spot, right? So rising rate environment, typically good for financials. Those are usually big, thick stocks. If their earnings come in strong, get good guidance. We could see a nice move in the financials. Maybe we see some action heading into those earnings, but they kind of bounced off an area of potential price support as well. So worth keeping an eye on financials. I think it's an interesting space. I actually have a couple of names in the financial space on my list for this week. XLP, consumer staples. So, of all the indexes, XLP actually, consumer staples actually held up fairly well. And that kind of makes sense because typically considered more of a safety or cautionary type trade is the consumer staples. So, think Kraft Heinz, Procter & Gamble, those types of names could be interesting to keep an eye on those. If the market really does continue to sell off, that sector has actually held up fairly well. So maybe worth keeping an eye on some of those names, or maybe looking to even dip your toe in that sector. Consumer discretionary really took a hit last week, and so did retail. Pretty significant hit in both of those. So there's a lot. Oil and gas, I didn't put anything up, but energy plays have actually held up pretty well as oil is holding up well. I think you can maybe still look at that space, but let's go ahead and, there's still a lot of reason to be cautious out there. Like I said, maybe we get a bounce on Monday, but that could be short-lived. So until we really get into earnings season and get a better idea of where we're headed, guidance-wise, right? Okay, let's take a look at the list of stocks to watch for the week. Now, I got a little bit of everything on here, right? Trovenge, which does have a huge gap on the daily to potentially fill, for flirting with a potential $1 holla. Had a little bit of news on Friday and a lot of volume, 13.9 million shares trading hands. It's only got 4.8 million shares in the float. Now, this could be a red to green play, day trading opportunity, high risk swing if you want to look and maybe try and get a gap fill. But maybe what we look for here is a pullback into the 85 to 89 cent range. Take an entry there. You've got a pretty clearly defined area to put your stop, maybe 75 cents. And you're looking for a $1 test and roll. Now, this could just consolidate here and build out a little flag pattern. Worth keeping an eye on it. I'm not crazy about this company. They've really done their shareholders wrong. Big time dilution machine. They just did a reverse split. Have not been shareholder friendly, but there was a lot of insider buying at significantly higher prices. So kind of interesting. Worth keeping an eye on Trovenge for a high risk swing or potential day trading opportunity. Another potential gap fill. And I'm looking at stocks. We had a week tape, right, last week, and we had some stocks that held up well in a week tape, right? So that's a kind of an indication of potential strength, and maybe we look for that strength to continue even if the market struggles. So, and that will, that will draw attention to these names. So, ALT had a pop on Friday. Also looking for a potential gap fill. Could get up into the 850 range. Maybe even, hold on a second here. 875 or so. Actually closed near the top of the high of the day on pretty good volume. It's only got, looks like 1 million shares in the float. So this is a low float. Hold on a second. All right. Sorry about that. But let's see, where was I? ALT, small float. Not exactly sure why this popped. Looks like they just did an offering, so you don't have to worry about an offering coming soon. But potential red to green on this one. Day trading opportunity as well. Now, keep in mind, the IBB had a pretty significant pull last week. Maybe we get a little bounce there in the biotech space. But that is another sector that is, kind of guilty till proven innocent. But ALT could be looking for, maybe we look for a pullback to say $7, 650, somewhere in that area. See if it holds support for a little bounce. PYX. So read an article about this guy, this company. This was AIO or AOI. They changed the symbol, changed the name. You know, it's a potential cannabis play. They had some news last week and had a nice little pop. Now this has got a small float, 8.3 million shares in the float, trading pretty good volume. Had a nice, again, a relative strength day. In comparison to the markets on Friday, could be looking to take out the $29 holla. Could be a day trading opportunity, could be a high risk swing. This is an interesting area on the weekly. You take out $30, it's a pretty interesting area. I'm thinking maybe you can get a pop up into the $34, $50, $35 area. But like I said, high risk name, a lot of volume, a lot of eyeballs on it. I'm sure there's probably a lot of people that read the Seeking Alpha article that I read this weekend. It's an interesting play, and you've got the other thing I like about this is you've got the golden cross which just occurred. You got the 50-day crossing above the 200-day, so worth keeping an eye on PYX. And I'm expecting news on the hemp. The farm bill anytime, any day now, and that could be another catalyst for these cannabis names. So keep an eye on that. MRMD. So MRMD was pointed out by one of the pro members last week, and I really loved the setup on the daily. Man, look at what it did. It broke out of that flag pattern. Now it's piercing the upper Bollinger Band after a 3-day run. Look for this to consolidate, maybe pull back, build out a base a little bit. But I really like the look of this MRMD quite a bit. If the cannabis space still stays hot, this is a little extended. Maybe give it a couple, 3 days to build out a little pattern. But I think this one's worth keeping an eye on for a potential day trade opportunity. iClick. So I think it was Russell that pointed this out. Got a little bit of a pop on Friday. Decent volume, kind of bucking the tape, right? Closed at the $4 holla. So we got a potential 4 roll. We're taking out this trend line. Looking for it to take out the 20-day moving average and potentially come up and test somewhere between $4.70 and $5 area. So, stochastics are starting to curl up. I don't know what the news was. I don't think there was any news. Could be a day trading opportunity. And really, that's kind of about it. Just a day trading opportunity on this one. But worth having on the radar if it continues to get some volume next week. CIVI. This had a nice big pop on Friday. Back above the really all the major moving averages, the 50, the 20, and the 200-day. So looking for this one maybe for a red to green move. Only has 11 million shares in the float, traded 136,000 shares. Now that's not a lot. It trades pretty thin, but I thought this was a pretty interesting move on Friday, and maybe we look for a red to green type play on this. Look at where it stopped. It stopped right here at this trend line. So maybe you pull back to 1550, right? 1530, somewhere in that area. See if it holds a support for a bounce. Little scalp trade, bounce trade opportunity there. QTT, this was pointed out by, I think this is also pointed out by Russell. Little pop on Friday, right? Little pop on Friday. And this is a recent IPO. It's right here at the 8 EMA. Maybe you get a red to green, pull back into about the $7 area, and then see if you get another follow-through day on this. Could be a day trading opportunity, could be a higher risk swing, but QTT does kind of have my interest. RDNT, very nice pop on Friday after piercing the 50-day moving average, right? So a few days prior. Pierced the 50-day and then snapped back. Nice little reversal candle there. and broke out on Friday with some pretty good volume, 449,000 shares trading hands, looking like this wants to go test that $16 area. So maybe what we look for here is a pullback to 14.95 or so, 14.90, and take it for a bounce. See if we can go back up and test that 16 roll. And then let me see if that is, that's all-time highs for Radiant. If we can take out 16 bucks, so you're in blue skies with that one. I think it's definitely worth keeping an eye on. Kala. So Kala is another biotech name that it's got a pretty interesting look, right? We got a little cup with handle formation going on here. We got a potential flat top breakout if we can take out 560 or so with authority. And then looking like maybe we get a 6 test at the 200 day, find some resistance there potentially. But if we take out $6, this could get really interesting. There's a gap to fill on the daily of this one as well. But interesting look on the daily. Potential day trading opportunity. Only 26 million shares in the float. Maybe an entry as close to $5 as possible could be a place to take a position. I think it's got an interesting looking setup for Kala. Vuzi caught my eye on Friday, got a little bit of a pop. It's got an interesting looking daily. It's consolidating here at the 50-day moving average, looking for it to potentially give us a 7 test and take that out. If we can take out the $7 holla, then I think maybe we get a test into the 750, 790 range. So tech, not exactly the real hot spot to be right now, but Vuzi is actually holding up fairly well. It's got an interesting looking setup on the daily, worth at least having on the radar. MFIN, Credit Services, so broke out. Actually, this looks like about the third day of the move. Good volume, 20 million shares in the float. Had a really good looking setup on the daily time frame, and we are taking out an area of potential price resistance on the weekly. I'm thinking maybe this could go up and test somewhere around the 8 and change range. So potential red to green on this one, or look for this to make build out some kind of a pattern here on the daily, but nice relative strength against the market, right, in a weak tape. So pull back to say 685 or so could be very interesting. See if that holds a support. Could be a potential swing opportunity in MFIN. PXLW, I've been watching this set up for a while, and it actually had a nice little pop on Friday, but it didn't get any follow through. So I'm not super crazy about this candle. I think the $4 area, $3.80 to $4 could be an interesting spot, maybe for a bounce. It does have a gap to fill to the downside, so that is something to be cautious of. This is kind of a little fake out breakout here, but let's see what it does next week. It does have an interesting look, and I think they reported pretty decent earnings recently. So PLXW, maybe a day trading opportunity. Maybe a bounce off of the $4 380 area. Worth keeping an eye on it. Huya, the China names have been beaten up pretty badly, right? So I kind of like Huya. I like IQ. I like Bizon. I like Baba. I'm watching those pretty closely. The trade war has weighed heavy on these names. At some point, I think we're going to get a pretty nice bounce in those. Right now, they're trending lower. But they're at areas of potential price support. If this Huya gets down to $20, I don't know. I think, $19.50, somewhere in that area, $19 could be an interesting spot to take it for a little swing. See if you get a bounce, and then a trend line break. But, higher risk on those names. NTWK, I've played this one in the past. I actually had this, I think I might have had this on a list last week, but broke out over this trend line on earnings. It trades super thin, 120,000 shares. It traded hands on Friday. It's getting a bit extended but it's grinding higher, right? It's well within the Bollinger Band, and it might just continue to keep on grinding. Could be interesting on a pullback to $7 or maybe in the 650 area, right? Drift down a bit, test that as support. The problem is, the volume can dry up in this name, but it is grinding higher. It's a small float, and maybe it gets a little pullback to $7. Could be an interesting spot to take it. Worth at least having on the radar. BDSI, I have been watching this one set up for quite a while as well. Now, this is another biotech name. It seems to be kind of bouncing between the $2.35, $2.50, and $3 area. I mean, that's a big potential flat top breakout. Now, we've had a couple failed attempts to break through that $3, but we've moved back up into this $3 area, and we're kind of starting to build out a little flag pattern here. Maybe the next time it takes out 3, it does it with authority. This isn't really a thin stock. I mean, it's not uber thin. It's thin, 51.7 million shares, but looking for a 3 break, but maybe on a pullback into the 250, 265 area, it's an interesting place to take it for a swing, right? Because it seems to be building, bouncing back and forth between within that channel. So worth keeping an eye on. BDSI, FNJN. This is a patent play. It's been holding up extremely well. I think they had pretty good earnings recently. Looking for a trend line break. I really am just kind of looking at this one as a day trading opportunity. Only got 20 million shares in the float. Looking for a break over, 470 with some volume. Could be a nice scalp opportunity. Ship, it's a penny stock, shipper. Right, I think presenting next week, it's kind of interesting. The shipping space has actually kind of been grabbing my attention lately, and it's kind of. I mean, look, this thing is a little wild child, right? It can have some pretty dramatic movements but that's typical of penny stocks. But looking for it to potentially take out the $1 holla, take out the trend line, take out the 200-day. Could be interesting with some volume. Trades super thin. You got to have some volume to trade it. It's at least worth having on your radar. NEPT, another cannabis name. We've traded this one a couple of times already, and we've been buying it. We bought it in the $3 range, and then I think we got it in the $3.50 range or $3.35 range, and looking to kind of do that again, right? Pull back into the $3.50 range. Find some potential price support for a bounce, but NEPT, I kind of like. I've been, taking each time I've taken it as a, short-term swing, not really a day trade. But I like NEPT again if it can pull back into this 350 area as a potential a swing play. IQ, I mentioned that, right? It's testing this area at 2460 as potential support. Breaks below 2460. I think maybe we get a pull into the $21, $21.50 or 2050 area, and that could be an interesting spot to take IQ. I like this more of a long-term hold swing possibility on IQ. AVEO, they I believe have an event next week that could move this stock. It looks like it's trying to hold on an area of potential price support. Kind of has a bear flag here, so I'm not super crazy about that. But if they have something positive announced next week, this thing could pop back up into the 350 area fairly easily, and then maybe go get a 4 test. So worth having AVEO on your radar. INGN. Looking at this one, it's pulled back to an area of potential price support, right? So maybe it finds some support here and bounces off the 100 EMA. Worth at least having on the radar. SB, another shipper that also is presenting at that shipping event. Interesting looking setup on the daily, right? Flirting with the $3 holla. right here, consolidating at the 50-day moving average. Only has 31 million shares in the float. And I kind of like, this is a big area, this $3. If you can take that out with some conviction, I think you're going to have a little bit of resistance right here at around the 330 to 328 area. You got the 200-day potential price resistance. But then if we can take that out, I think 365, maybe up to the 390 area for a target. Could be a day trade, could be a higher risk swing. LCI. This thing got crushed. There's been a 10% owner that has been building a position. Big gap on the daily to potentially fill. We'll see if this 460, 450 area holds as support. If that breaks, then you know what? We don't know where this thing finds support, but worth keeping an eye on this one for a bounce play, right? It's only got 26 million shares in the float. Pretty small float, so worth keeping an eye on that one. ACRX also has I believe has an event potentially next week. Pulled back to an area of potential support. There have been insider buys, 275 to 335. We're getting close to that 275 area. Did an offering that priced at 275 in July. Coming back, maybe testing this trend line as potential support. It's in a very interesting spot. I like it for a potential bounce play trade. Could be a day trade, could be a very high risk swing. SEED, recent reverse split, had a nice pop last week. This tends to be a pop and flopper. Definitely do not chase this. Maybe look for a pullback to say $6. 580. See if that holds the support for a bounce. Could be a day trading opportunity there. Some other names real quick. Disney, right? I like Disney on a pullback to say the 110 to 112 area. I think for a long-term hold, those would be areas to consider. Maybe either taking a starter, and with the potential to add if it pulls back, to 105. I just think that these names like Disney, if they continue to pull, if the market does weaken, these are the kind of names, for your long-term portfolio that you want to be looking at for potential starter positions. Start building out a position for a long-term hold if they really start to get hit hard. So Disney is one. ATVI is another. Activision, right? Activision pulls back to $75. I think that's an interesting spot to look at Activision. EA Sports is another one, right? It breaks down to $110 or $100. That could be an interesting spot. Or you could do what I did, which was Gamer. I actually took a little starter in Gamer, the ETF, last week. And I could be looking to add to that position. It's a good way for me to have exposure to the gaming industry, and I'm talking video games, without just taking one individual stock, right? So I kind of like this ETF for my long-term IRA portfolio, and I think that's worth keeping an eye on. GE, I think, is another one to keep an eye on. New CEO, had a nice pop, good volume. Could this be the bottom? It possibly could. However, you have a new CEO. You're going to have earnings that are going to be coming up. I think before you really get aggressive with GE, you look for a kitchen sink from the new CEO, right? And maybe we come back and we test the low 11s for support, and that could be the spot to jump in on GE. All right, that's it. I'm going to wrap this up. That is the entire list of stocks to watch for next week. It's it can be pretty choppy. Gap up days are tough days. If we have a gap up on Monday, I think that could be short-lived. So keep that in mind. Could be a volatile week next week. Always have a plan. Know your risk reward. And good luck trading next week. Have a fantastic rest of the weekend. And I'll see you all sometime soon.